In June, I spent 2 days exploring a small patch of South Norfolk countryside, staying for a long weekend on a farm in Aslacton, 2 miles west of the Ipswich Road south of Norwich. Rising early on the day after my arrival from York, I prepared for an 8 to 9 kilometre walk between 4 rural villages with medieval churches. These 4 churches have unusual round towers. Round towers on church buildings are not as uncommon in East Anglia as they are in other counties, where fewer survive standing today. Norfolk has the greatest distribution of round towers compared to any other county in England, contributing to the grand total of 179 surviving nationally. The introduction on medieval churches in the revised Norfolk Buildings of England volumes describes a local fancy for round towers driven by considerations of style, with the majority dating from the Norman period, though some are slightly earlier. The geographical cluster of medieval churches in this part of South Norfolk is particularly dense. Each round tower on this walk served as a beacon, popping up over the embankment of a sunken lane or a hedgerow as I tramped the footpaths and single-track lanes linking the remote villages of Aslacton, Forncett St Peter, Wacton and the more populous Long Stratton. From my accommodation a short distance down the road, I arrived in Aslacton at about 7:30 in the morning. The church was open and I was definitely the first visitor of the day. Aslacton's church, dedicated to St Michael, has a prominent 11th century tower with perpendicular battlements added much later. All the literature I have read around St Michael's church describe it as a delightful country church with local character, a church of local people, and I have nothing more to add than to confirm that it is just that. I agree wholeheartedly with a sentence quoted in separate descriptions of the church when researching for my visit, that this is not a church you would come to wanting to see something in particular, rather to experience the sense of an English country church doing what it has done for centuries. There is a pulpit with an interesting set of wooden carvings worth a closer look. David, the young shepherd, stands in profile holding the severed head of Goliath, with a scene in miniature of their conflict below. 16th century and Flemish, says Pevsner. 17th century, says Munro Courtley. Take your pick, say Mortlock and Roberts. I stopped a while longer here than intended, taking photos and sketching the font and the exterior of the building from a shaded spot under a large tree in the southeast corner of the churchyard. Joggers and dog walkers occasionally peering over the boundary hedge to say hello. I departed at about 10 o'clock in the morning on a northerly walk up to the village of Forncett St Peter. Forncett St Peter is altogether a picture postcard church, rich in character, but its 10th century tower alone is well worth coming far to see. The small Norman west doorway set into the base of the tower is unusually placed. The rest of the church is later medieval, and the church interior has an excellent set of carved bench ends, which, although not products of the Middle Ages, have been entirely convincing as to spark debate about their age. It is generally now assumed that they were carved in the 19th century, and convey traditional scenes including the labours of the months and the 7 deadly sins. One has a woman standing in a sentry box, one of which can still be seen at Walpole St Peter's in North Norfolk. Others show grinning devils. St Peter's has been on the Heritage at Risk register for several years now. In 2020, Historic England awarded a COVID-19 Emergency Heritage at Risk grant for project development work, but structural movement remains unaddressed and fundraising continues for its overall repair. As such, the chancel remains off limits and internal scaffolding erected to prevent further movement. However, whilst I was making this video in August, there was some good news. A 5-year fundraising campaign by local people and the community has secured a grant of £631,000 to repair Forncett St Peter's from the National Lottery Heritage Fund. Arriving now in Wacton, I haven't a great deal to say about All Saints' Church here. I felt less of the charm experienced by Mortlock and Roberts, who say that the outline and fenestration of this little country church at once arrests the eye. The round tower is a silo of the late Saxon period, an early example of its type, jutted against a later continuous nave and chancel, and despite the presence of scaffolding for building work over the path to the south entrance, the church is still kept open daily. The interior is light, spacious and uncluttered, owing both at once perhaps to the building's hall-like dimensions and footprint. The residents must make good use of this remarkably large space and clearly keep the interior in good order in terms of storage. I, for one, made good use of my time alone here to get an aerial view of the interior by ascending the rood stair set into the side of a window with its exit emerging at the former rood loft level. I should say that this is not something I would encourage anyone to do normally, but I couldn't resist the temptation to get a closer and higher up look. Having left All Saints Church behind, I made the final stretch of my walk from Wacton to Long Stratton, skirting the edges of South Norfolk fields under a warm sky to the final historic church of the day. Situated in a large churchyard on one side of the busy Ipswich Road, St Mary's Parish Church at Long Stratton is a typical Norfolk church of the medieval period, with a stoic Norman round tower and a later fabric dating predominantly to the 14th and 15th centuries. The interior is, again, spacious and has several interesting features of the 17th century, including a pulpit and font cover. The crowning feature of this period, however, is to be found on the north side of the sanctuary. Here is the monument with two effigies representing Sir Edmund Reeve and his wife Mary. Edmund, who died in 1647, was appointed a Judge of Common Pleas in 1639, and here he lies stiffly, as described by Mortlock and Roberts, on his side, fat of face with goatee and moustache, smiling faintly. His wife Mary looking a deal less pompous but much more comfortable. However, St Mary's Church is famous for the surviving Sexton's wheel. Only two are known today to have survived, this one and the other at Yaxley in Suffolk. In the later medieval period, when veneration of the Blessed Virgin was at its height, penitents would sometimes be directed to observe the Lady Feast. On occasions, they would come to the sexton to determine the day on which to begin. There are 6 days in the church's calendar set aside for the honour of Our Lady, and 6 long threads were tied through the holes in the rim of the wheel, each one identifying a particular feast day. The sexton would spin the wheel, and the person would grab at a thread at random to determine when they should start. This is a fine feature of great historical and ritual interest, and the PCC are clearly proud of it, as it has been presented in a glass display case. After some time spent chatting with the folks at Long Stratton, who were clearing up after a service, I headed by bus into Norwich to end my day at the pub. The following day I headed to Tivotshall for my final church visit of this trip, which will form the basis of my next video. So until then, thank you for watching.